We turn now overseas. The situation in Iraq grows more dangerous. Islamic militants are now battling for control of a key oil refinery. They began the siege late last night and continued the attack throughout Wednesday. The insurgent fighters fired mortar shells at security forces on the ground as Army helicopter gunships tried to repel the attack. The siege could trigger significant fuel shortages. Iraqis depend on this refinery to supply fuel for domestic consumption. This attack comes as the militants continue their march toward Baghdad. They now control large swaths of territory. For analysis, we turn to former U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, David Newton, who is now with the Middle East Institute. I spoke to him earlier from Washington, D.C. Ambassador Newton, welcome to Arise America. Thank you so much for being here. There are so many aspects of this crisis in Iraq to talk about. I'm not really even sure where to start, but let's start with a conversation that perhaps is a gorilla in the room, and that is where and how Saudi Arabia plays in all of this. Of course, that's a Sunni nation. They monetarily back the rebels in Syria, and as one analyst on our show said a couple of days ago, would be apoplectic if the U.S. Paired with Iran to answer this crisis in Iraq. So how much could they muddy these waters should they decide to insert and assert themselves in some way?
Well, I don't think we're going to pair ourselves with Iran in the first place. We have some common interests. The Saudis do not like religious fanatics, even if they're Sunni, but there's no doubt that at least private Saudis and other Gulf Arabs have been giving some help to people like this. The Saudis have been very upset over the treatment the Sunnis have received at the head of Maliki's government since the Sunnis have largely been shut out of the government. And they certainly have been giving support to them. But Saudi Arabia is not particularly favorable to any kind of violence because they live in a dangerous neighborhood themselves.
The President of the United States, President Barack Obama, has said that boots on the ground is absolutely off the table, not an option. And now we are also hearing reports that airstrikes might be off the table because of perhaps a lack of intelligence for real and reliable targets. So what are the options for the United States at this point?
Well, airstrikes are still a possibility. You can't have the kind of really pinpoint targets you have unless you have American individuals on the ground directing the targets. But you can still have targets of opportunity with airstrikes. I think it is still on the table. Drone strikes, drones are only good for a relatively small number of people because you just have one weapon from these drones. But I think the United States is going to seriously consider airstrikes. Beyond that, there really is no possible military option. The United States is tired of wars after two attempts one of which did not turn out at all well in Iraq, and the other one whose outcome in Afghanistan is still undecided.
I'm just wondering what your perspective is on the diplomatic options that are available at this point. You know, there's a lot of finger pointing, a lot of criticisms about, first of all, shouldn't have gone into Iraq for a war in the first place. Then, you know, perhaps came out too quickly. The terms of the pullout perhaps were not right. So at this point, where we are now, what are the diplomatic options for not alienating groups that could turn out to be really arch nemesis for us down the road?
Well, I think there's generally a consensus in the United States that the 2003 war was not a good idea, and that the outcome, the way we handled it, certainly made it worse. But we're tired of war. I don't think that the blaming is of any use. Diplomatically, our main option is to try to put pressure on Prime Minister Maliki to reach out to the Sunnis. It's very late, however, and with the prospects of a civil war, it looks like a pretty tough job to try to get these people together. And of course, we won't know whether it will really happen for a long time.
Is it possible to reestablish a completely unified Iraq at this time? Do you think inevitably it's going to fracture into its ethnic divisions?
Well, that's the real long-term threat, that Iraq will break up into three pieces, which would not bring stability and would bring a lot of trouble. And first of all, the Sunni Arabs would be left out of the oil riches. No, I don't think that's a good idea at all, but getting them back together again would take a long time. And given the fighting that's going on in Syria next door and so forth, it's going to be a long, hard task to get these people together. In any case, the Kurds will continue to go their own way.
Yeah, with that in mind, though, Ambassador Newton, is it realistic at all to think that the Iraqi central government in some way can take back the territory that ISIS has claimed?
I think there is a possibility. They have much larger forces than ISIS. Now, some other Sunni Arabs seem to have joined them, but once ISIS fails to advance further, these people may drop away. The danger is, of course, in taking this territory back, there will be a lot of killing of Sunni Arabs by Shia forces marching north, which would make the situation again even worse.
Very quickly, before I have to let you go, of course, there have been reports of a number of kidnappings, 60 foreign construction workers apparently taken hostage, as well as 15 Turks near Kirkuk, and 49 seized from the Turkish consulate. How might these kidnappings then draw in other countries like Turkey into this whole quagmire?
It's possible if Turks are harmed or killed in this effort, if there's any more fighting around the Turkmen town of Tel Afar or any other Turkmen town in Iraq, it's possible the Turks could be drawn in. And I don't think they'd be anxious to do so, but if they did, they would do so pretty decisively.
All right, former Ambassador David Newton, we thank you so much for your expertise.